Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Remembering Podcast. We are here with Marguerite Rigoglioso. And welcome, Marguerite. I'm going to read your bio in just a moment, but we're recording video and audio this time, and I'm really just usually used to recording audio. And so here we are looking at one another, and I'm just beaming. I'm so excited for this conversation. Welcome.
Thank you. It's really great to be here, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Yes. So I'm so excited. I'm going to read your bio and then we'll get started. But yes. Marguerite Mary Rigoglioso, Ph.D, is the foremost authority on the history of virgin birth and has taught graduate and undergraduate classes in both the United States and the United Kingdom. She is the director of her own esoteric school, the Seven Sisters Mystery School, dedicated to restoring knowledge about the sacred feminine and to empowering people on their non-traditional spiritual journeys. She is the author of 3 books, The Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece, and Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity. And her most recent book is The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, Mary and the Lineage of Virgin Births, which is the topic of our conversation today. You can find Marguerite at the Seven Sisters Mystery School.com. Actually, I added the word the Seven Sisters Mystery School.com. And we will give you more information on where to link up with Marguerite at the end of our conversation. But I personally am so excited to have you here, Marguerite, for many reasons. But here we are talking about Mother Mary and Immaculate Conception. And we are releasing this podcast episode for the Sacred Remembering Podcast right before Christmas. And so we are just... You and I are so excited to give Mother Mary a new reputation as much as we can and here in this conversation. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know that gives me chills. Ooh, because I think this will be the closest to, Christmas holiday of any of my talks that that there are. So that's really, really cool.
I love the divine timing of this podcast. It's always just way beyond me. But yes, when you and I spoke, and then I was looking at the schedule, I thought, oh, perfect, perfect. Immaculate Conception. So let's dive in with Mother Mary and setting the record straight a bit. And I know that there are going to be so many listeners of this podcast that are so graced and blessed by, writing her reputation and developing a new story, which is the true story. And we're bringing that back now here in sacred remembrance and putting voice to this lineage and the mystery and the magic that this was. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Well, yeah, as you're probably aware, and many listeners are probably aware, Mary Magdalene has kind of had her unveiling and her resurrection, so to speak, in the past 30 years with all of this scholarship, as well as things like the Da Vinci Code and, starting with Margaret Starbird, decades ago. So we've already had this experience of looking at women of the Holy Family, the holy grouping around Jesus, and looking at them in a new light, in a light that sort of more jives with our intuition. Like most of us growing up Catholic are like, there was always more to Mary Magdalene, and there was always, now we're realizing there was way more to Mother Mary. So now what this is Mother Mary's reckoning. This is the writing of our understanding of Mother Mary. This is really just the beginning of it, because we haven't had the plethora of things that are under our belts, so to speak, around Mary Magdalene yet. This book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, is really this first unveiling, and it's something that I've been talking about. Yeah, thank you so much for having it. It's something that I've been talking about since I finished this major work back in 2007 with my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation, which was about divine birth as a practice of priestesses in ancient Greece. And
Mm.
already at that time, I was starting to look at Mother Mary and her texts and understanding, wow, she wasn't the only one. You know, there were women before her. There were women doing it while she was alive. There were women who did it afterward. But so the main thing that I'm bringing forth is that divine birth is a real practice of specialized holy women. And Mary was in that lineage. She had a family lineage that was part of it. And she was in a cultural lineage, you know, all around the ancient Mediterranean world, Africa, really on every continent. There are these stories of divinely born, specialized children who then gave humanity a leg up. And the thing about Mother Mary that's unique is what I'm really uncovering is that she was probably the most skilled practitioner of this. She was the highest elevated practitioner of it. And she gave birth to the highest being of all the births that happened through this miraculous means, you know, before, during, and after the lifetime of Jesus. And one of the things is, one of the reasons why is because it turns out that Mary was divinely born of her mother. And that's the actual real meaning of Immaculate Conception. Because it turned, when I looked, the Catholic Church's doctrine of Immaculate Conception is not about Mary's virginal birthing of Jesus. The doctrine states that Mary herself was born without sin. And so what that is veiling is this fact that's in her repressed gospel, the suppressed gospel called the infancy gospel of James, that her mother was already practicing divine birth before her. And so she already gave birth to Mary. And that means that Mary came in with a very high divine pedigree, so that when she went to become a divine birth priestess, she was already so empowered, so basically one with the goddess herself, that this is why she was able to bring in such a high holy avatar as Jesus, because this was the purpose of this practice, was to bring in high holy avatars, unusual beings who could give some great benefaction or healing or evolution to humanity. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at here with Mother Mary and her lineage.
And would you say that it was her destiny to come and bring Jesus, Yeshua, forward?
Yeah, very much so. I
Yeah,
mean, I think that,
that's why she came.
yeah, I think I'm realizing more and more, this was a plan of the entire Holy Family. And by that, I mean, not only her mother, Anne, but Anne's consort, Joachim,
Mhm.
Anne's sister, according to the Islamic tradition, Elizabeth, who was the mother of John the Baptist himself, Mary's consort, Joseph, Elizabeth's consort, Zechariah, and the Magdalene. I feel that they consist, or they comprise this holy family, this holy retinue. I think they had multiple lifetimes coming onto the planet, going through the lake of Lethe, as you know, they talk about in the Platonic tradition, where you have the Greek tradition, you have to remember who you are when you come back, something that a lot of us are trying to do now. Now, some of them would come back with total memory, but some of them, you know, they would have to kind of get revved up again. But I think they made this plan to just all come together at that time, around 2000 years ago. And they had all had their various incarnations. And there's a Hindu saint named Sri Kaleshwar who has written a book called The Real Life and Teachings of Jesus Christ. And he claimed to have past life memory of walking with this holy family. He said that Mother Mary had, he says, millions of lifetimes. Okay. So they were planning. And there was no, what's happening to me, let it be done according to thy will. There really, that wasn't the reality. for
No.
Mother Mary. Yeah, she was not a passive victim. She was not an unknowing experiencer of this phenomenon of practically being raped by God, no.
Oh gosh. And like this lowly peasant,
Yeah.
going off and having this baby in a stable. Like, no, 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 no.
No, 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 no. They were
No.
all really part of a very conscious group that had timed everything astrologically and to, in their timelines to be, boom, we're all going to be here at the same time. And they got busy. And Mother
Yes.
Mary was able to achieve this divine birth when she was anywhere between 12 and 16 years old. That's what the infancy gospel of James tells us, which is something that was honored in the Orthodox Eastern Christian tradition. The Catholic Church rejected it from the Bible, but they kept some of the events for the feast days, these inexplicable feast days, like Mary's presentation in the temple and Mary's Immaculate Conception, from Anne, Mary's birthday, or, it's like, where were they getting this information? And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I'm trying to look. No, I mean, this information was in there in this gospel. They did not consider it canonical. They rejected it, probably because, it just had too much information that was threatening to patriarchy.
Yeah. Right.
But they still kind of honor, these figures and these events of Mary's life through it. So it's really kind of a strange phenomenon with that gospel. But these are some of the areas where you start finding out this information about Mary, and she was between 12 and 16 years old, whereas her mother Anne and then her aunt Elizabeth, who gave birth to John the Baptist, they were in their older years.
Yeah.
So some of these women were practicing this throughout their entire life. They were waiting for this actual divine birth to happen. But because Mary was so high and elevated, came in that way, she was like, boom, able to do it right off the bat at an early age.
Thank you. Now, do you talk about the Essenes at all?
A little bit.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Because, obviously Claire Hartsong,
Yes.
in her books, Anna, Grandmother of Jesus, and Anna, Voice of the Magdalens, she was a major oracle for this information.
Yeah.
And it turns out she was receiving a lot of this information in her hypnotic sessions while I was doing the work, the literal research on divine birth.
I love it.
For my doctoral dissertation at the California Institute of Integral Studies, years later, through a fluke, I found her book that I thought somebody had recommended a different book. And I got this book and I said, oh, to my friend, I got that book you recommended. She said, I didn't recommend that book. And I'm like, what? So anyway, Claire talks a lot about that these folks were all parts of the Essenes. Yeah. I do find evidence for that. And I do talk about that in my chapter about Anne's divine conception of Mary and really digging into what the gospel says about that. There are a number of things that Anne does that are very reminiscent of what Philo writes about. It's either Philo or Josephus who writes about the Therapeutae, the Essenes. The Therapeutae were one branch of the Essenes, located, I'm not sure if it was very North Africa. And so they would do things like they would have this very sparse diet. And that's what Anne did with Mary as soon as she was born. They would compose these songs of praise to the divine. That's what Anne did when her child was honored at a year old. So there are these little hints that I see just even in this suppressed gospel. And then, of course, because I was just trying to stick to that really for the analysis in this book. But yeah, Claire fleshes it out. And I think it just makes complete sense that they would have been part of a different type of holy order. They were not traditional Jews.
Yes, very, very much. Very much. Yes. So there's a story about Anna that's actually very close to my heart. And so maybe I'll share that in a moment. But can you speak to You say Anne, Claire Hart's song says Anna.
Right.
Why
Right.
the difference?
It's
Yeah,
just a different transliteration. I mean, the original Hebrew name would have been Hannah.
right. You do
Okay.
talk about that in your book.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I just, how it gets, translated down is into Anna in the Greek, or
Hmm.
Anne in the anglicized and French version. I
Hmm.
tend to use Anne just because it resonates with me
Mm,
regarding something in childhood. So that's just the
mm.
form that's near and dear to my heart. But whatever you use as the name, it's pretty much the same name. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious about that. May I share a little sacred
Sure.
story about this? So, much of my remembrance has been around this lineage because my father, who did oppress the feminine, loved us very much. Father of three daughters, I was the oldest, but very much carrying the patriarchal and also some darker inheritance as well. And so here I come, little starseed, born into this family and have this work of remembering. And I was sitting in the Methodist pews. I mean, Mother Mary didn't even have a place in the Methodist church. Like
Yeah.
no feminine had the place in the Methodist church. And I was listening, like as a child, I was listening for where's the feminine. And I knew that something was very inherently wrong because the feminine was like just wiped off. And I was only getting messages of pure obedience and, no sexuality as I got older and things like that. And so my little rebel heart was like very much interested in bringing this truth back, and such that I became, well, I was always like sensualized, it's a part of being a woman. And I end up getting pregnant at the age of 18.
Um,
And from that kind of upbringing, you can imagine the shame, the religious shame, the sexual shame, but also the message of you haven't made something of yourself yet, right? So you're not supposed to be pregnant because you got to go to college, you got to do all these things. So I'm in the basement. Like they put me in the basement of my parents' house when I go home from college pregnant. They put a little twin bed up and like no bedroom door, it's just like the pregnant girl in the basement. Okay. And one day I'm like, the baby's big enough to be moving. And I hear this very, very clear message. Her name is Anna Faith.
oh my God.
I know. I'm having full chills. I'm like, she's here. Anna's here. And her name is Anna Faith. And it was so clear I could not
Wow.
argue with it. But I did argue with it because I said, I'm not naming this baby Faith. Faith is about my father's, like my dad has the faith, and I don't want anything to do with that. And of course, I gave her the name Anna Faith. She was adopted at birth, and so Anna became her middle name.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I know my daughter. She's now 21 years old.
Oh
She's
my gosh.
beautiful. She's thriving, but she carries the name Anna. And it took me like through my awakening, which was very much reclaiming Mary Magdalene and putting her back beside Master Jesus, right? And that divine union, that really satiated my soul. And then to find out that my daughter was named for grandmother Anna, of course, right? Of course.
I keep getting rolling chills here. Amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
So
beautiful.
yeah, so I am of this lineage, as many probably listening are. And so just those, I mean, massive sacred remembering breadcrumbs, right?
Yes.
But yes, so my affiliation with her is Anna for that reason.
Wow, how beautiful. And Anne was known as the goddess of childbirth, conception, she's as Saint Anne, like, who
Yes.
is this Saint Anne? Since we don't see her in the Bible, but nevertheless, she is considered a saint. And, if you just look her up, even in Wikipedia, I mean, she was petitioned whenever women needed to go through a childbirth or when they wanted to get pregnant, so it just feels like, wow, there she was with you right away from the beginning, helping you to remember some aspect of yourself. And there's so many women and men, I mean, people of all gender identities who connect with me and tell me their stories, or they just feel part of this lineage in one way or another. So I think there's so much awakening, like a lot of us are back now.
Yes. Yes.
This great unveiling is happening, and it's such a gratification to your soul to have that. And what a healing, as though she's saying to you, this child isn't dirty, this child is divine, this child is wanted, this child is sacred. And feels to me like it was this comforting message to you, really.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I knew that I knew that I was her like harbinger. Is that the right word? Like I was like her guardian. I was bringing her through, and I knew that my life would actually flump for a while. Like I knew that it would be very, very hard for me for a time,
Wow.
but I knew that my job was to get her through.
Wow.
And so yeah, yeah. And then it took me, the better part of 2 decades, like a
Wow.
good decade and a half, to really have the remembrance. And I mean, even me saying right here, right now, that I'm a member of this lineage, like I don't broadcast that. I am right now, obviously.
Yeah.
But, it's like the
Yeah.
things that come back. And then I think it's important for us to put these things to voice, like you have done in the book, and like we're doing here with our voices, to say, yes, like this lineage is alive and well on the planet, and it is the time for this great remembrance.
It's so astounding, isn't it? When you really think,
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, 2000 years, and
Yeah.
yet this stuff has just been suppressed and suppressed. And where have we been? Like, thinking about divine birth is something real, like, wow, that got completely squashed. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's part of the awakening, along with everything else that is being restored with the feminine. So it's a
Yes,
fascinating time that we're in.
it really is. And yeah, my soul had this intuition somewhere last spring to learn about Immaculate Conception. And that's actually how I found your book, which I think I told you the first time we talked, and you kind of made a joke like, sure, Sarah, it's really common for you, for someone to just like, want to research Immaculate Conception. So, the soul was like knocking, hey, it's time to learn about this information and like womb magic and potential. So I would love to dive into Immaculate Conception, divine birth. I mean, what was going on there in that priestess lineage
Right,
that they
right.
were able to do this? Yeah.
Exactly. And so I tend to use the terms miraculous conception, not immaculate, because
Okay.
the whole Catholic Church, they put that whole, you know,
Thank
it
you.
is describing Mary's birth from Anne, but their overlay is that, and no sexual feeling was involved because sex is a bad thing, and that really wasn't it, because this to give birth divinely, in other words, to conceive within your body without male sperm is a highly erotic act.
Of course. That's it's like, yes, very, very sexual.
It's
Yes.
sexual, very sensual. I would even say that an orgasm is part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so I use the terms miraculous conception, virgin birth, divine birth. Sometimes the women are virgins, sometimes not so, in the sense that they may be having an astral type of sexual encounter with a god, or they may be involved in a kind of a tantric union with like a high priest. And so they're not technically a virgin. But so there are different types and there was a different a trajectory of how these practices went. But the purest form of it is what I call is parthenogenesis, which means parthenos is the maiden, gignesthai is to be born of a maiden, meaning to be born of a woman without sperm of any kind. We recently had the California condor that parthenogenetically produced another condor bird within her body. And so like this can happen biologically in the biological world, especially under conditions of duress or environmental pressure and things like that. It can be experimentally induced at times. But we're talking about spiritual parthenogenesis, a true virgin birth, where generally these women had to remain celibates in order not to have any interference of an energetic from a male, not to have any interference from a lineage from a male, not to have any claiming of the lineage by the male line. So it was a really high level priestess act that was an inner tantra, an inner weaving and activation of one's own egg that it seems from my research that I've described in these various books that you mentioned, is a becoming androgynous, a becoming both. You become the male female so that you're able to just spark your egg. But obviously these women are working with the high level light interface, because Claire Hartsong calls these conceptions light conceptions. And I remember having this conversation with her, after I'd written my book and I started writing, reading hers. And she said they were light conceptions. And I just went, I know that because I read in the ancient Greek tradition that some of these are described as like a light coming down from the heavens, impregnating the woman. So there's this element of this supernal light that's connected with the DNA and that creates an androgyny and a conception. So the woman is operating, just imagine the levels of yoga that she's doing in order to have a conception of this nature. Okay, we can only, I go into some of that discussion in the book based on these little tiny shards that are given in that infancy gospel of James. I go as absolutely far as I can based on that. Obviously, Claire Hartsong is going even a little farther. And so, there were various aspects of this practice of parthenogenesis, which originally gave birth to female children. But then the women knew how they could figure out how to give birth to a male child with that. And then again, there were these later phases where the woman would be even interrupted in her divine birth conception by the advent of an unbidden male god who would come into her ceremony and rape seduce her. And then, the conception would actually be from the god as well as the female. And there are many stories throughout ancient Greece and beyond of these people who were born as the children of the gods from these rape seduction ceremonial situations. And this is where we have the rapes of the maidens in the Greek tradition. That's really what it's describing.
That's what it is. Okay. All right.
This predation. Okay. And then we have, this other formula where the high priestess and the king, or the high priestess and the high priest would get together and have a sacred conception with male sperm being involved, but it's thought to be a divine conception from the spirit of the god. And that's the Egyptian pharaonic lines supposedly came forth through that technology. And then we have the technology of the sacred dildo. And this is where Isis's, the dildo of Osiris, comes in for her to get pregnant with Horus. It's really interesting because Rudolf Steiner says that Mother Mary's previous incarnation was as Isis.
Okay.
So, and that feels like truth to me. So that if we see this as a continuum in her lives, she was trying to perfect this divine conception, and she was eventually weaning herself off the phallus, right? Yeah. So Isis was just working with the golden phallus, but not the actual physical phallus. But by the time she's Mary, she knows how to do this internally. Okay. So you know, that's some of the discussion of the timeline, the technologies used. We're starting to get at some of the finer tools that would have been used. But again, I do talk a lot more about that in the Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, the newest book.
Yes, everyone buy the book. Everyone buy the book. This is
Yeah.
so good. So let's talk about patriarchy a little bit more, because of course they would want to interrupt this. So you're saying this was common, like this was throughout history. The priestesses had access to this.
They did, they
Yeah.
did. And I wouldn't, it still was a rarefied,
Yes. Yes.
you know, it wasn't for everyone.
Yep.
And it wasn't even accomplishable by everyone. You had to be of a certain order, a certain type. Now, that said, some of the women who were in a degraded form of the practice really misused it. You know, we might consider Olympias, the mother of Alexander the Great, so-called great. She's supposedly one who gave birth in this way, but through an encounter with Zeus Ammon. And, you know, that led to this kind of wild, marauding Alexander who was just causing trouble on the planet. Whereas there were other women who were bringing forth much more beneficial beings, like Perictione, the mother of Plato, and Pythias, the mother of Pythagoras. They were said to have had divine intercourse with Apollo. And those two males were the result of that. Now, those two males gave blessings to humanity. They were there to help open humanity's consciousness. Plato with all his precepts and Pythagoras with all of his precepts. So it really depended on the level of the priestess, what the level of the child was that was coming in.
The integrity, the
Integrity.
spiritual connection.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And, you know, I'll mention to you, because this is just coming in, you know, about this pregnancy, it feels karmic. A typical story that you would hear in the ancient Greek is that the divine birth priestess was pregnant. Her parents are all getting all upset because they don't really know if she had sex with someone or if she didn't. Or they don't believe that there could have been another way that she could have had sex. And so both the female and the child are thrown to the fates to see if they're going to live or die, you know. And there are these, you know, so it feels like there's almost something coming in there about that point at which the parents find out, and it's like you were maybe working something through. But if you go to the cult of divine birth in ancient Greece, you'll see some of those stories of the women, you know, like Danae, who gets cast into the sea with her child, Perseus, I believe. So, yeah, these are just little tidbits that I'm offering here.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I am writing like the memoir, but the memoir isn't quite coming through because it's not meant to be a suffering story. It's meant to be like a sacred remembrance story. And so this throws a whole other layer on there. But her father was actually like a very, very close love. My daughter's father. This is the first time I'm speaking about this. He wouldn't have a problem with it, but we were separated because like he was, I mean, it was all divine. Like it was very divine. Our souls go back and back and back and back. But he was very much separated out. And then I was kind of like alone and, you know, had to give this baby away. And it took he and I like 16, 17 years to come back around. And now we're some of the best friends. But I know that it is an ancient, ancient story. But it was also this severance from like sacred masculine. Like I was told that he was terrible, but he really wasn't. And it like skewed my concepts of masculinity for a very, very, very long time, because I was like very impressionable as this youth that had to give away her baby. It was like
Yes.
very traumatizing. And so, yeah, there's something there. We're weaving. There are lots of energetics present, because this piece about the severance of the sacred masculine right there, and like the taking of the power at the point of pregnancy, that
Yeah.
does feel very, very old.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So you might find some codes or memories getting sparked if you go back to the cult of
Yeah.
divine birth in ancient Greece and read it.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there'll be a lot of information for you there. Mm.
Yes, yes, yes. Something is weaving. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in a client session, and we were very much in the records, and it was very, very clear that I was to tell her that she had been a priestess of miraculous conception.
Wow.
So I know, and I was like, whoa, I don't know what this means, but it's showing up
Yes.
in my life more. Yeah, yeah. So.
Well, the veils are coming off.
They are. They
Yeah.
are. So yeah, there just feels like another question. I don't have the question to articulate, but is there anything else about patriarchy kind of interrupting this that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that I talk about throughout all of these books that I've written. It Virgin birth is the most threatening thing possible to patriarchy.
There we go. That's why.
That's pretty much it, bottom line,
Yeah.
because it puts women outside of any of the control mechanisms that are generally used to keep women in line, to control their energies, to control their offspring, to control, whatever. And so it's, obviously, it's something that needs to be made into a biological impossibility by patriarchy.
Yeah.
And it needs to be veiled even by the religions that kind of rely on it for their validation that they
Yes.
are bringing forth authentic streams of spirit connecting information and characters. So, as always, the Christian establishment, they both show and hide the thing at the same time, because they know that there's a power underneath it, but they don't want to show it too much because they don't want you looking too closely, because then you'll start getting curious, not only about these characters, but about all women,
Yeah.
and
What are they capable of?
what are they
Yeah.
capable of? What is the womb actually capable of? And goodness, if women could start conceiving outside the bounds of even sexuality, which of course is a totally contested, hijacked field by controller forces on so
Mhm.
many levels, with what has come in to create disturbances like, your experience with your love. And so, I mean, it's like, it's a whole, that's why the time is now to start all of a sudden, like we're realizing that the scales are falling off our eyes, like, what, this
Mm.
stuff has been here for 2000 years. How come we have not looked at it this way? And it's like, well, I guess, I and others came in at a divine timing, just like the Holy Family themselves, to say, look, there's going to be enough of an opening that we've got to turn that key and open that door. This is going to be it. And it corresponds. It's going to be helpful to everything else that's going on the planet right now. Because this divine birth technology can, and I sense can be and has been hijacked. So that's
Yes.
another way that it gets
Yes.
harvested. It gets, not only does it get veiled and pushed away, but it gets used. It gets veiled like, hey, this isn't real. Meanwhile, these controller beings over here are using it in an inverted way, just the way everything has been inverted by them to create
Yeah.
problems on the planet. And then it becomes used for hybriding projects.
Right. I mean, because it is the most powerful force.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
who's coming in? Instead of the Jesuses of the world, we've got, demon seed running around. So that's the other kind of scarier um, aspect of this, that, I've been talking about, and that is coming up. And I think that we need to look at both. How has this been used? How has it been hijacked? How is it maybe still being misused? And how do women of integrity and connection with spirit, who are spirit servers, reclaim it? And
Yes.
when and how and under what circumstances? And then the next step in that. So it's like understanding what are the mechanisms. And I mean, I was shown when I was doing this research back in the early 2000s that it would be something like 30 or 35 years before enough of the codes were back that women could actually start doing it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I do
Mm-hmm.
know that there are women who are collecting the information now. And for all I know, there could be an unbroken lineage of women who have done this, and bless them,
Mm-hmm.
But also we look at whether ultimately it's even an outdated technology if we can all have our own divine birth, our own ascension
Right.
within
Like the
the
inception.
ascension, the ascension
Thank you. I couldn't like
within
mixing up the
within our
mm-hmm.
lifetime, because a lot of us are putting
Ascension.
into ascending, insending, because it's an inward process
Right.
into the fifth dimension, into the next dimension. I mean, something that Mother Mary and Jesus were able to do at the end of their lives. They apotheosized. They went into the final ascension. Mother Mary merged with Divine Mother. Jesus merged with Divine Masculine Father. We're all kind of on that path, many of us, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what is the role of divine birth in a world in which many people are trying to simply turn on their divine human blueprint?
Right. Right. I feel to speak something, and even, for as bold as I am on my own podcast, this is even like, holy crap, I can't believe I'm sharing this. And I think it's important for this conversation because it's like, I think I'm living a real world application of what you're sharing because I personally hope I don't have to have another baby. Like I don't want that to be the end of the story. Now above 40 years old. I have a son as well, a almost 13-year-old son.
Wow.
And so, my curiosity about this miraculous conception, I do hope it does not end in me having to have a baby. But this is what I was going to say. I have met many soul brothers who are in this lineage. Like I have partnered with men who are in this lineage, and a part of remembering Mary Magdalene and remembering that sacred sexuality and my own soul's priestess lineage, and this Immaculate Conception like wasn't even on my radar a couple of years ago, but I did know that I had these past lives as a Dakini, a priestess, like had sexual healing powers. Didn't know exactly what that meant, and I'm not a casual person at all, and so it would be the partners that would come into my life. It was like one brother on the Christ lineage and then another and then another, and like very, very close relationships. And just kind of recently there was like a spark and a remembrance of someone who I've never shared with him that I think this, but that it was another one, right? Like another soul brother in the lineage. And what I was shown, because I kept partnering with men who had not done their deep remembrance work, like, the trauma healing, like everything we need to do to clear this lineage and to like resurrect the light. And it was, and every time, Marguerite, it was infiltrated by this dark
Yeah.
energetic. I mean, this archon, like, oh
Yeah.
my God, they would just come in and hijack the man, and then he would kind of energetically attack me. And so I was very much shown this summer as I was, in this womb awakening, that, and it was just pings, right? Like, hey, pick up some books about this, and, pay attention, and, something's happening. Meanwhile, life is happening, right? So we're modern women, these things are getting pinged. But I was shown, there was a part of me that wanted to open up a relationship with this man because I could feel the heart's connection, but there was still enough, like, I'll say, collapse, um, that he had not done his part of the remembering.
Yeah.
And I was shown, like, you don't do that anymore. You cannot enter into these partnerships with these men who have not done their own remembrance, because that is like the recipe for the archon, for these deceptors to get in and
Yes.
attack you in the womb space, like attack
Yeah.
you in the spaces that count and destroy you as a woman. And I've been through that multiple times, 4 times counting my father.
Yeah.
And so they definitely, the guides were like, you hold the seed from now on, like, you do not, engage sexually
Yeah.
with these men until the light being comes in, the man who has embodied the light. And so
Yeah.
I
And
feel
what,
a lot of sharing, but
and that's important, because all of this is so relevant to what women are going through, especially women of priestess service. First, what's coming to me is that, in a way, divine birth may have developed in the cauldron of all of that controller energy, because it just became clear that they could not be in any way infiltrated by a human male in this. So they moved from Tantra into virgin birth and parthenogenesis. However, then what happens is the male entities themselves will come in, so there's a constant attempt at hijacking of the womb space and the womb energy in a planetary system where controllers have already taken claw, right? They've taken claw into it. And so they've continued to siphon off and attack the womb space through all of these repeated intergenerational traumas that have been upon us. And then if people don't do their deep clearing work, you're susceptible at one of the, chakras for these beings to come in, which is what you experience, what others experience. And so what's happened, the good news is that, Lisa Renee, who is a major oracle on the planet, has been saying over this last year that the Magi Grail King Hieros Gamos template is available again.
Oh,
so,
I feel it. Yes.
Yeah. So there may be less and less of that issue coming up for people as an automatic, something's always going to get in the way, right? Number one.
Yeah.
And then number two, as people realize that part of the ascension or ascension work, whether you want to have a divine birth as a priestess of parthenogenesis, whether you want to have a divine birth as a couple, whether you want to just continue to give divine birth to yourself, part of this is the healing, the release of the energies, the release of the trauma, and so forth. And one of the things that I will mention that I've been trained to do and offer a class in this are the Holy Womb Chakra teachings, which is this consolidation of energy and information that Sri Kaleshwar got from these ancient manuscripts of India, with a mantra and yantra practice that will purify your womb over a 30-day period. If you do it, not a 30-day, a 3-month. And boy, is that powerful. It seems like, well, what could this really be doing? Oh, let me tell you, on every level of your life, including sexually, it's doing a lot. And if you faithfully go through this process, at the end, you're going to find even different types of partners coming in, a different kind of, sexual relating, really quite amazing. So there are tools and techniques that are available to address exactly what you're talking about. This is just one possibility that people can go to the Seven Sisters Mystery School website and go to under the online courses, the Holy Womb Chakra teachings. And we even have a $50 discount between now and the end of December 2021, but the course will always remain available. So there, we do not have to be stuck in these eternal cycles.
No.
And
no.
we're getting better. And even as the world looks like it's starting to go to heck in the handbasket, over the 2 years, like, oh my God, this is the positive timeline, whatever. I think that these super positive things are happening at the same time. And some of these old, horrific sexual traumas are being able to be released so that we can find our true partners, whatever level we want to engage with them. And those women who do want to engage in parthenogenesis can do it again if they want to, or extreme high tantra with a man.
Yeah. Yeah. What an amazing conversation. I love this so much. I guess the next natural question, and if there's anything that you want to share, I think we're beginning to come to a close, but do people reach out to you in present time that have been experiencing this, that have divine birth?
Yes, for
I
sure.
imagined.
Yeah, over the years. And, as I was writing the dissertation that became basically now these 3 books, I was being shown that there would be a long trajectory out into the future, and people would want to start coming to me for guidance, what have you, look at the books and get whatever codes they need. So yeah, quite a number of people over the years have spoken to me, either as part of classes or, after weekend workshops or for private one-on-one work, for us to look at, okay, what is your instinct about your memories here? Or how far do these memories go? I can assist them with that. And most important, what does it mean in this life for you? What do you still need to clear and heal from that? And what do you want to take from it going forward? How do you want to empower yourself? And so, yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're a guide for people as well. I think more and more people working as healers and clairvoyants for people are going to have this come up as women reawaken. It's kind of like we've had all the witch burning people. We're all back, Now it's like, then there was like the oracle people. We're all back. And now it's the divine birth people who are oftentimes very much connected with the oracle centers, or also had past lives as so-called witches or whatever, were persecuted. So we're all just clearing this up energetically, timeline wise, and, so that we can reclaim our womb power for ourselves in whatever way we want to use it, and go forward to co-create the new earth with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. I can see so much more after this conversation, how you said in the beginning, this is almost just the beginning of this in this timeline. And I remember you said something like that. I think we spoke in like August, September. I don't know, timelines are funny, but we spoke at some point, and I said, I'm just looking for some, information on what is going on in the womb. And you said, I think it's still coming. And so I can see and feel and feel the excitement of that so much more after this conversation. And so thank you so much for being on the leading edge and for bringing this book forward. And
You're welcome. It's been a very intense journey, I have to say.
I imagine. Yeah. Is there anything from your story you want to share?
Really glamorous. I mean, well, a lot of struggle and suffering to do it, a lot of sacrifice.
I imagine so. And please feel free to share anything. I'm prompted to ask, what made you interested in this in the first place?
I got a downpour doing some research on Demeter and Persephone for my master's thesis at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And I was reading this one particular book one day, and she was talking about the Demeter and Persephone story as being ultimately a parthenogenesis story. And it was like, whoa, this is a power of the female, and this is the power of women. Women were actually doing this divine birth business. And so I started looking at, I was intrigued by priestesses of ancient Greece. I wanted to catalog all of the details of whatever's been written about them. And when I started going with that thesis in mind, wow, all of this stuff started unfolding. But of course, it's a past life thing for me, you know.
Of course.
I was just trying to remember where I had been and what this was all about. I had made a pact to come back in this lifetime and open the doors again for divine birth as a real thing, because of a violation, a transgression, or let's say I was tricked by one of the male gods in one of my lifetimes. And I gave divine birth to one of the gods' children instead of my own parthenogenetic issue. And I was so deeply, mortally upset about that I agreed to come back at a time when it would be possible to open this information again. And that time is now. So I think that's kind of what I make of it. Yeah.
Chills throughout my whole heart when you said that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying yes.
Like all of us, we went through so much suffering to get here. So many missed experiences and horror shows and sacrifices of, you know, normal life type situations. And it's been a lot, and a lot of suffering to do that karmic clearing for myself, that trauma clearing, that healing, which of course is always an ongoing process. But I'm realizing lately that I'm rounding a corner with it happily, you know, and which happens to correspond with the end of my 50s, the completion of Pluto being opposite my sun, my natal sun, which is like, you might as well just cash it in and just under the covers for 3 years, because it's like hell, you know, the hell realms. And then I'm completing a Saturn return, you know, as of this weekend, like amazingly. So it's like, oh, a lot of the penance, you know, has completed. It feels.
Oh, wow. And you just turned 50. I just turned
50. I'm 59. So I'll
be. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just turned 40 this year, and I am sometimes not so happy with how much more I have to do, you know. And,
hang in there, sister. Hang in there, because you know, the atmosphere is getting a little easier for, like, with these things underneath that are happening, the atmosphere is getting a little easier to do it.
Yes. My friend who studies human design, she said, well, remember, you're still on the roof for like another 10 years, you know? So I'm like, oh gosh. But yeah, yes, humbled, honored, and, you know, just keep going.
The whole gamut. Oh, the humbling, you know. It's just like, it's such a necessary part of it. I guess in order to be able to speak of these things with groundedness, you have to be deeply humbled.
Well, and like to be in the integrity, like we were mentioning before, you know, if you're going to hold like your kind of, I'll say, position, like here on this planet, you know, you need to be in integrity to bring these codes forward.
You need to deal with so much stuff. And get into the compassion around that for yourself and other people, you know. So it's a journey. That's a whole other parallel story, right?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming, and please share with us. I definitely need to do this womb course, which you had already told me about, but so the Seven Sisters Mystery School, and you had a coupon to share with everyone. Yes, please share whatever you'd like.
Right. So between now and December 31st, 2021, you can get $50 off either what I mentioned before, the Holy Womb Chakra Teachings, which is that really fundamental course, which, by the way, Sri Kaleshwar says that those were some of the practices Mother Mary used, some of the mantras and yantras, as well as what I have called the Mother Mary Mystery Teachings. Another course that's like a 6-week or a 6-session course. Everything you want to know about Mary from esoteric womb perspectives and finding out about her as a power priestess that she really is. So you can, it's Holiday 50, all capital letters, Holiday 50, all one word, okay? And then what I also have is a monthly circle for a low subscription price, which it's called the monthly Mother Mary Love and Empowerments Circle. And that meets the third Thursday every month going into January on into the new year, for just $27 a month. But all of those things can be found if you basically go to the homepage. They're pretty much listed even on the homepage right there. And you'll be put on the email list, or you can sign up for the email list and keep an eye on what else I have coming up. And obviously, you know, you can get the book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, in paperback, Kindle, and Audible, because I recorded the Audible version. So that's kind of a wonderful thing to have, to get the energetics that were put into that. So yeah, so there are a number of resources that people can have. And so when you go to Seven Sisters Mystery School, the 7 is written out, S-E-V-E-N, okay? And yeah, there's lots of other free stuff too. Other talks I've done about Mother Mary, each interview that I've done and on my YouTube channel, it's kind of its own thing. Some of the information overlaps, but because of just the unique point in time that I am at with it and the interviewers' questions and so forth, each one brings out its own, you know, yarn, if you will. So you could be at those free YouTubes for a long time under my name, Marguerite Rigoglioso. So
wonderful. We'll make sure this one gets on there as well.
yes, we sure will. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, I'm just breathing with the acknowledgement of the major codes that you're carrying. So thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Yeah. And you as well. And so we'll see how this all unfolds with you and with people listening. And yeah, and if people want guidance, obviously they can come to you. They can also come to me. I do one-on-one sessions. I have 3-session specially priced packages as well. And I'm always happy to work with people on this level too. So
wonderful. So good to know. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.